Hello and good morning. Welcome to Tandem HR's 2013 first quarter webinar. My name is Samara Beachdell and I'm one of the senior HR generalists here at Tandem HR. To give you some background on our company, Tandem's goal is to simplify the people process, enabling organizational leaders to maximize return on investment in people and concentrate their efforts on driving organizational success. As HR experts, we aim our quarterly webinars to provide a value add for our client owners and their employees. Now, to omit any static or interruptions, I've placed everyone on mute. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to type them into the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen, and I will follow up with you directly following the presentation. Alternatively, you may contact me or your HR generalist directly. Today, we will discuss how to use background screening as an effective pre-employment tool during the hiring process. People make the world turn, and in your company, they turn the work. You think you've got a great candidate and you want to offer a job. You hire what you thought was going to be a perfect employee, and you find out they did what? You can't have that person in your company. As an employer, the hiring decisions you make directly affect most everything within your workplace. Human capital drives the business and creates the work environment at your company. It can be a difficult task to know what you're hiring. What prospective employees have done before you hire them might not include that stellar behavior that you're looking for. Or, did they really do what they said they did? Some studies show that more than 40% of applicants lie on their resumes and applications. A successful background screening program for pre-employment can help you through the hiring process. In order to hire great employees, you need to weed out the candidates that are unacceptable. Although companies may be looking for a diverse set of employee qualifications, today we're going to discuss the common background checks available and those items that are common to all employers throughout a background check process in what happens in Vegas may not stay in Vegas. How to use background screening for employment. Now let's take a look at what we will be specifically covering in today's webinar. First, I'll clarify why an employer would choose to use or not to use background screenings. The second topic for discussion is options. As candidates for employment, people forget the touches they make can resonate far beyond a moment in time. Not only should employers know of the options available to investigate, but how to interpret and apply information captured from background screening. Finally, I will provide tips and guidance to help employers and clients determine if and how to implement a relevant process at their company. Organizations can become more successful using pre-employment background screening. More successful means increased profits to for-profit organizations and greater results or heavier hitting effects for nonprofits. The first step to understanding background screening is sifting through the pros and cons, as well as factoring in what might be legally required or restricted. To review the detailed positive results of background screenings, I intend to discuss time and cost reduction that increases quality and reduced turnover, hire the right person the first time. You want to look at reducing workplace violence, avoiding negligent hiring, and decreased loss to the company due to employee dishonesty. Weighing the negatives associated with background screening, I will discuss the cost to employers, the time spent, and bad results. And then influences of legality on background checks include meeting regulatory, insurance, and consumer requirements. Legality also influences what and how employers can use information gathered. The positives. Screening candidates during the pre-employment phase enables employers to make the right hire the first time. Background screenings increase the accurate and objective information available to hiring managers prior to placing the candidate. A candidate may present the perfect resume or application and may give the perfect responses in an interview, but you want to make sure that the information presented is accurate. Gathering and confirming details from multiple sources provides a clearer understanding of the applicant's qualification and reduces an employer's risks. An employer can determine if a potential employee is appropriate for the job and work environment by learning whether the applicant has the experience, knowledge, education, and training required to succeed at that job. Now, uninformed hiring and bad hires cost money. The replacement cost of a bad hire can be as much as 5 times the salary of the position. The direct and indirect costs of recruiting, hiring, training, and the wasted wages and benefits impact the bottom line. Also consider for a minute the management, the administrative, and legal costs of a bad hire, plus the cost of damaged or stolen funds, materials, equipment, the work environment, customer goodwill, and employer reputation. Verifying applicant claims helps the employer make the right hire the first time and is clearly worth the investment in a thorough background check. Although many of us might associate this picture with fun and comic books, workplace violence is much more serious. Workplace violence includes assaults and threats which occur in or are related to the workplace and entail a substantial risk of physical or emotional harm to individuals or damage to an organization's resources or capabilities. We're reminded every day in the national and local news that violence is everywhere, from law enforcement to schools to convenience stores. Providing a safe work environment is a moral and legal obligation that employers face. The National Crime Victimization Survey collects information on violent crimes against persons in the workplace. The NCVS reports that from 2005 to 2009, law enforcement officers, security guards, and bartenders had the highest rates of non-fatal workplace violence. Workplace violence accounted for 15% of non-fatal violent crime against persons aged 16 or older. Strangers committed the greatest proportion of non-fatal workplace violence against males at 53% and females at 41%. Among workplace homicides, about 28% involved victims with sales and related occupations, and about 17% involved victims in protective service occupations. Prior history is a good predictor of future performance. Power is knowledge in this area. Background checks are used by employers to identify applicants prone to unacceptable workplace behavior. Knowing whether a candidate is or was involved in criminal activity, such as drug or other substance abuse, reckless behavior, dishonesty, theft, or dangerous and violent behaviors, assists in the process of deciding if that candidate is appropriate for the job and the work environment. It can also help employers determine if the candidate poses a potential threat to other employees. Now, according to a survey conducted by the U.S. Department of Justice, 1.75 million days of work are lost each year by victims of workplace violence. The cost in lost wages equates to about $55 million annually. When employers include less direct costs such as lost productivity, legal expenses, diminished public image, the annual cost of workplace violence would be exponentially higher. Simple tools such as criminal record checks can reveal potential risk before hiring. What companies don't know about a job applicant can hurt them. Employers can be held responsible for both what they know and what they should have known about their employees. If recruiting and hiring practices are careless, a company can be left to face the consequences. SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, published an article stating that negligent hiring is the failure of the employer to investigate a job applicant's work experience, character, criminal history, and other relevant data prior to the hiring of an employee. Employers are generally expected by the public, the law, and the courts to be extra vigilant when screening if a future employee will access consumers' financial, medical, or personal information, have access to consumers' living quarters or residence, work with the infirm, the elderly, or children, work with hazardous materials, or they're going to be responsible for the safety of themselves and others. With careful pre-employment screening, the following scenarios might not have occurred. School officials hired an escaped convicted murderer who taught at the middle school for months while they waited for the results of a fingerprint check. A bookkeeper with a criminal file a foot thick stole $2.5 million from 15 to 20 businesses over a 12-year period. An accomplice who he met while he was doing prison time for fraud gave glowing recommendations to anyone who called the reference number listed on the resume. Hiring a bookkeeper based on chemistry cost one consultant $70,000 from her business bank account and family savings account. And a school district superintendent pleaded guilty to 1 count of forgery and 4 counts of grand theft. He was sentenced to 1 year in jail for stealing $6,200 from student body funds. When hired, he had lied about having a doctorate degree. Upon completing his jail sentence, he was hired as a mid-level manager for a well-known telecommunications firm. On the section of the job application where he was asked whether he'd been convicted of a crime, he answered no. A routine company audit later disclosed discrepancies in a contract he had struck for the company, resulting in a multi-million-dollar billing dispute. The company acknowledged that they never would have hired him had they been aware of his past. One bad hire can result in a lawsuit. If an employee injures or harms another employee, especially if the company could have foreseen a problem but did not do a thorough check of the new employee before hiring, would be considered a result of negligent hiring. According to one 2001 report by Public Personnel Management, employers have lost more than 79% of negligent hiring cases. Thorough background checks and corresponding documentation are important in reducing risk of negligent hiring and demonstrating that employers take reasonable care in the hiring process. The U.S. Department of Commerce reports that 30% of all business failures result from theft or embezzlement. A 2012 report by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners states that the typical organization loses 5% of its annual revenue to occupational fraud. The median loss caused by the occupational fraud cases in the study was $140,000, but keep in mind more than 1/5 of the cases caused losses of at least $1 million. Occupational fraud is a significant threat to small businesses. The smallest organizations suffer the largest median losses, and nearly half of victim organizations do not recover any losses they suffered due to fraud. The thieving and fraudulent are not always those ones would expect. Managers, employees, and owners or executives alike have been perpetrators. Theft and dishonesty can cause indirect costs to businesses through reduced production, damaged reputation, and negative employee morale. So, red flags that are often associated with fraudulent conduct include living beyond means, financial difficulties, unusual close association with vendors or customers, and excessive control issues. In 81% of the cases from the AFCE study above, one or more behavioral warning signs were present. Past employment issues, falsified education, criminal and civil records, bad credit, drug use are just a few measurable signs. Verification of reported information can be valuable honesty checks. Time is passing by at record speed. You needed someone yesterday that you could be doing your job. You've already gone through the process of posting the position and sifting through maybe hundreds of applications. Then you and some of your key talent sat through 10 hours of grueling interviews to interview the best of the best. Many employers do not take the time to run the screenings because they just want to start moving forward again. With the loss created by an empty work desk, time is of the essence. The con of running a thorough background employment check for employers can sometimes be the time that it takes. Don't forget, though, that extricating the wrong hire and his or her residual effects from your company can take a lot longer than the most thorough and rigorous screening process. Monetary restrictions may eliminate best practice screenings for businesses. Poorly executed background checks can waste money. It may be worse than no background check at all because they might give you a false sense of security. Failure to be aware of and follow federal and state legal requirements can actually add to the cost in the long run. Additionally, employers may feel that background screening is unnecessary due to the confidence in their candidates' referrals. We've already discussed how reliable word of mouth can be. Quality backgrounds may seem expensive, but can easily pay for themselves and become a value to employers. Mistakes can and do occur in background checks. After all, the information in a background check was created, compiled, maintained, searched, and reported by fallible human beings. This is why it's important that employers give applicants the opportunity to review negative information before any adverse action is taken. If that applicant finds information in that background check report that's incomplete or inaccurate, the employer should be promptly informed. If errors are found on a background check, it's likely that the applicant will need to contact the original source of the information, whether it be an employer, a school, or a court clerk, and request that information be corrected. A background check vendor should also be willing to reinvestigate and reissue the report at no further charge. Employers do not have an unfettered right to dig into applicants' personal affairs. Workers have a right to privacy in certain matters, a right they can enforce by suing you if you pry too deeply. And you may be legally required to follow certain procedures, such as getting the applicant's consent before you request certain records. Potential employers may no longer use credit reports to make employment decisions without the consent of the job applicant. So you're on the safest legal ground if you ask the applicant in writing to consent to your background check. Explain very clearly to them what you plan to check and how you will gather the information. This gives applicants a chance to take themselves out of the running if they know there are things in there that they don't want you to know. It also prevents applicants from later claiming that you unfairly invaded their privacy. If an applicant refuses to consent to a reasonable request for information, you can legally decide not to hire that worker on that basis. The Fair Credit Reporting Act guides the use of background information for employers and outlines rights for prospective employees. The FCRA is a federal law that was designed to protect the rights of credit-active consumers by placing limits on who can see a copy of their credit reports. It mandates that while a consumer may request a copy at any time, no one else may legally review the report unless they intend to conduct a credit transaction, underwrite insurance, make an employment decision, or conduct a legitimate business transaction. State and local laws and regulations also apply to employee background checks and must be carefully followed. Generally, these laws and regulations specify how notice is to be given to the applicant, how written permission is to be obtained from the applicant, how any information obtained and used must be relevant to the job, both as to how old the information is and how the specifics relate to job performance, how the confidential information is to be handled and disposed. So if you decide to run a background check, make sure your inquiries are related to the job. Stick to the information that's relevant to the position. For example, if you're hiring a security guard who's going to carry a weapon and be responsible for large amounts of cash, you might reasonably check for past criminal convictions. If you're hiring an administrative assistant, however, a criminal background check is probably unnecessary. Employers can get into legal trouble if they go overkill or overboard. You don't need to perform an extensive background check on every applicant. Even if you decide to check, you probably won't need to get into extensive detail for every position. If you find yourself questioning neighbors, ordering credit checks, and performing exhaustive searches of public records every time you hire a clerk or counter person, you might need to scale it back a little. Successful job fit or anticipated performance can be narrowed by manager and employee involvement. Inaccurate information can be spotted through reviews performed by a skilled HR professional. A combination of those techniques, paired with a comprehensive background process, can be immeasurably valuable when you're selecting your candidate for hire. So, a reputable and pre-employment screening service can provide verification of information presented by a candidate, either on a resume or an application. So, the key puzzle pieces that make a perfect background screening program can include skills assessments, behavioral assessments, drug screens, physicals, and background checks. Skills assessments can be really convenient tools to gain objectively scored measurements of candidates' skills. They can be adapted, implemented quickly, and applied to large numbers of candidates. The content can be a simple typing test, a writing sample, or even a complex problem-solving exercise. These results can provide reference measures and external validation for your selection or elimination. This is going to assist with slimming down the pool of candidates and eliminating bad fits. Post-hire, employers may also see reduced or eliminated time demands for on-the-job training. Additional retesting post-hire can show progress through the training process. So drawbacks may include that the assessments only measure relatively superficial knowledge or learning. They're unlikely to match the specific goals, objectives, or values of a company, and that norm data may be generic rather than representing company-specific requirements. A person's behavior is the product of the interaction of their personality characteristics with specific situational opportunities and constraints. Behavioral assessments can be used as a guide to selecting candidates based on competency benchmarks. These assessments can be built on a few questions or a few hundred questions. They might be delivered in multiple choice or essay form. They can function to help eliminate those candidates that are not truly interested in a position, only employment. When a company clearly defines those benchmark behaviors that are present in successful employees, the results of that assessment improve the likely fit of a candidate. So the likely fit of the respondent to the competency is described, and development tips may as well be offered. As I said before, assessments can consist of a number of questions. It takes time and effort to build viable behavioral assessments. They should be built with detailed input provided by both incumbent staff and management. Selecting the right questions for the right assessment can greatly improve the accuracy of the interpretation, but they might prove to be too elusive and too time-consuming. Then, determination of a match between candidate and position content must be carefully weighed and delivered. You have to allow the time for a candidate to answer the questionnaire. Those assessments should then be calculated with professional judgment. Judgments are subjective and they might not be valid or applicable. There is risk in relying on an individual's interpretation when biases might be there or when under-trained individuals are making the decisions. Technical manuals should always be used along with information on reliability and validity from the publisher of the assessment. This will ensure that the evaluation is sound. When a timely decision is required, that assessment can just be prohibitive. Additionally, cost is a factor to many companies. When cost is a factor, assessments might be reserved only for the higher level position candidates or eliminated altogether. The majority of employers across the U.S. are not required to drug test. Many state and local government statutes limit or prohibit workplace testing unless required under state or federal regulation. So, drug testing is not required either under the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988. On the other hand, most private employers have the right to test for a wide variety of substances. The current law in the private sector generally permits non-union companies to require applicants and/or employees to take drug tests. In unionized workforces, the implementation of testing programs must be negotiated. Even when testing is required by federal regulations, certain aspects of how the policy is implemented must be agreed through that collective bargaining process. All employers should ensure that they comply with any applicable state or local laws and design their testing programs to withstand the legal challenges. It's very important before designing a drug testing program that you familiarize yourself with the various state and federal regulations that might apply to you, so your Tandem HR representative can assist with this process. Pre-employment physicals are conducted to determine if an applicant is physically capable of meeting the essential functions of the job while maintaining that examinee's privacy and medical confidentiality. A well-designed physical exam program results in fewer injuries, lower costs, and a much better match of employees to their jobs. The exam is performed with attention to the job duties, including physical requirements and potential exposures to hazardous material. The content of the examination depends on the job and the worksite assessment. For example, jobs that require use of personal protective equipment like respiratory protection often include a breathing test, such as a pulmonary function test, as part of that pre-placement exam. Those involved in interstate trucking usually require a physical exam and a drug test. So a pre-employment physical can include complete occupational and medical history, examination of muscles, skin, bones, gastrointestine, head, ears, eyes, nose, and throat, respiration and cardiovascular system and neurological evaluations. They'll test for visual acuity and vital signs, including blood pressure. Following the exam, the medical provider gives a written opinion about that person's suitability to perform the job without health and safety risk to themselves or others. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA or ADAAA as amended, employers may inquire only about an applicant's ability to perform specific job duties. They cannot request an employee's medical records. An employer can't make a job decision on hiring or promotion based on an employee's disability, as long as the employee can do the job with or without reasonable accommodation. So an employer may consider information contained in the public record from a workers' comp appeal in making a job decision only if the applicant's injury might interfere with his or her ability to perform required duties. GINA, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, prohibits employers from making hiring decisions based on an applicant's genetic information. It also prohibits employers from requiring or asking applicants to provide genetic information, for example, as a part of that medical exam. If the employer learns about an applicant's genetic information inadvertently, so you're talking about it during the job interview, the employer still can't use that information in the hiring process. Criminal records help you select safe, honest, and reliable people. They deter dangerous individuals from joining your organization. Results typically look back 7 years and include felonies and misdemeanors committed, convictions delivered, or prison time served and a release within 7 years. Some screenings are going to include infractions. Civil searches can help you identify high-risk applicants by revealing legal actions filed by individuals involving the applicant. Companies should always tie this back to the application, where it's important to ask if they were charged or convicted with a crime. Now, the law varies from state to state on whether or to what extent a private employer can consider an applicant's criminal history in making those hiring decisions. Some states prohibit employers from asking about arrests or convictions that occurred well in the past, so juvenile crimes included, or sealed records. Some states allow employers to consider convictions only if the crimes are relevant to the job, and some states allow employers to consider criminal history only for certain positions like nurses, child care workers, private detectives. So the companies must define what is applicable for their business purposes. The EEOC issued a policy guidance regarding businesses' use of criminal background checks. The purpose of the EEOC guidance is to discourage businesses from refusing to hire ex-offenders. Although it doesn't have the express statutory authority to investigate and charge businesses for discriminating against ex-offenders, the EEOC believes that the background check results might cause disparate impact to some protected classes, such as minorities. So, a frank explanation from the applicant of any past problems provides the opportunity to explain what happened. This can get potential issues out on the table. Very few jobs and very few employers require an absolutely clean record to be hired. So employers can consider how long ago a problem occurred and whether that problem has any bearing on the position being considered. National background screenings report that almost 50% of their investigations reveal a difference in the information the applicant provided and what the reference reported. SHRM found that 53% of job applications contain inaccurate information. The CPA Journal cited a survey of 2.6 million job applicants that showed applicants lie about prior work experience, education, and falsify their credentials. Korn Ferry International found that frequently fabricated information includes reasons for leaving prior positions and applicants' accomplishments. Former supervisors, former coworkers, or friends who provide information about your applicant are somewhat more subjective than normal performance questions included on an employee verification. So, prior employment verifications confirm the validity of information provided by candidates and references, and confirms that it's accurate and identifies that correct candidate. Hiring managers and HR professionals are constantly reviewing resumes containing credentials of applicants, including education. Degrees might appear to be credible on paper, but many haven't been earned through a course study at accredited colleges and universities. Under the federal law and some of the state laws, education records, including transcripts, recommendations, and financial information, are all confidential. Because of these laws, most schools will not release records without the consent of the student. Some schools are only going to release those records directly to the student. Typically, in combination with candidate notification and signed authorization, a well-respected background check company can run verification of education like high school diplomas or a bachelor's degree. There are key indicators that might help you identify falsification of educational credentials. Individuals make really obvious mistakes when committing fraud on their resume. Some of the effective clues include the sequence of degrees. Normal progression of degrees earned is high school, bachelor's, master's, and then doctorate degrees. If your resume skips a step or the progression is chronologically out of sequence, this might indicate inaccurate information. The time lapse between degrees. It normally takes at least 3 to 4 years, if not 5 for some of us, to earn an undergrad degree, 1 to 2 years for a master's, and 2 or more for a doctorate. If the timeline seems too short, this should raise a red flag for you. And then inconsistent information. Work history might list a job in one state, but the education indicates a full-time student status in a different state during the same time frame. Again, red flag. Applicants can be eliminated from candidacy for falsely representing their educational accomplishments. Specific rules apply to certain types of information, such as credit reports. Only use credit checks when the information is directly applicable to the job. For example, a position where an employee is going to be handling company finances, like a CFO or controller position. Federal law prohibits employers from discriminating against applicants because they've filed for bankruptcy. This means that you can't decide not to hire someone simply because he or she has declared bankruptcy in the past. The EEOC ruled disparate impact. Some states, like Illinois, have really stringent rules limiting the use of credit reports. Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, or FCRA, employers have to get written consent from an employee or candidate before seeking the credit report. If you decide not to hire or promote someone based on the information in a credit report, you must provide a copy of the report and let the applicant know of his or her right to challenge that report under the FCRA. Social Security number verifications are an absolute cornerstone of background checks in the U.S. and the quickest, most effective way to verify the identity of an individual. A Social Security number trace is an indispensable element in any background screening program. The trace results in a 7 to 10 year history report of past and present addresses connected with the unique SOC. The report also lists the names associated with the addresses. This ensures that the background check has access to a full set of AKAs, also known as. So AKAs might include aliases, maiden names, nicknames, or spellings. The information gathered through the trace makes this process an essential component in criminal history investigations and a valuable tool in maximizing the effectiveness of other investigative searches. An employer should check the driving record of any employee whose job will require large amounts of driving. This means delivery persons, bus drivers, anybody driving a company-owned vehicle, chauffeuring, entertaining clients, or operating machinery. This is going to help maintain compliance with federal regulations like the FMCSA and DOT. Driving records are called motor vehicle records. Certain states don't list convictions for driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs on criminal court records, so this is going to heighten the need for an MVR check. Records are available sometimes for a small fee from the state's motor vehicles department. The MVR is going to indicate a license type and class. They're going to list the endorsements and restrictions, the expiration date of a license. It's going to tell you the status of the operator's driving privileges, suspensions or revocations, and violations, accidents, and DUIs. Members and former members of the armed forces have a right to privacy in their service records. The records may be released only under limited circumstances, and consent is generally required. The military may disclose name, rank, salary, duty assignments, awards, and duty status without the member's consent. Key items to verify are directly related to the discharge status, either honorable or dishonorable. The Consolidated Terrorist Watch List is one of the most effective counterterrorism tools for the U.S. government. A number of federal government agencies participate in the mission process. This was created in 2003 and directly linked to the events of 9/11. So the Terrorist Screening Center, or TSC, maintains the U.S. government's Consolidated Terrorist Watch List. It is a single database of identifying information about those known or reasonably suspected of being involved in terrorist activity. Terrorism has become a significant issue in all facets of today's society. Screening applicants against the terrorist watch list is a critical component for companies who deal with sensitive information, hazardous materials, or any other item that, if it was compromised, could pose a threat to the health and welfare of company employees or to the general public. The Sex Offender Registry identifies individuals who have been convicted of certain sex offenses or crimes against children and must register as a sex offender. Key positions that have access to children or the care of other people may be bona fide positions that are unacceptable for offenders. Popular websites like Twitter and Facebook allow users to provide details of their personal background and lifestyle. Facebook has more than 955 million active users, and Twitter has over 500 million. The information displayed can include relationship status, which might reference sexual orientation, affiliation or prior service in the military, religious beliefs, physical disabilities, and often a current employer or status as unemployed. Social media has replaced the water cooler as the location for communication among employees about the terms and conditions of their employment today. With this kind of weight, you would think it would be a great tool for employers, but social media websites are not. The information is protected under Section 7 of the National Labor Relations Act, the NLRA. The law prohibits potential future employers from discriminating against candidates because they engage in protected concerted activity with their current employer. Recommendation is to avoid using this in the hiring process. Deciding what items will consistently be requested for any candidate can be simple and small. Run a social trace, employment verification, and criminal history. These three basic choices can be the most effective combination of information requests. For specific jobs, add in the highest education, licensure and certification, or motor vehicle reports. For positions responsible for children, elderly, or infirm, add the sex offender search. Remember to reserve credit checks only for positions where they are directly relevant, for example, a company controller. Great application leads to a relevant background check. If you want specific information, you must ask the right questions. Tandem can provide a comprehensive application to capture all the information you need. A copy of the resume paired with the application will help to create a whole picture of your candidate's history. Once you have that history, you can start to request verification of information that the candidate provided. Inform applicants that a consumer report may be obtained for employment purposes. Make a clear and conspicuous disclaimer to the individual in writing in a document that is solely consisting of the disclosure. This means a standalone document, not as a part of the employment application form. The individual's signature on the document is required for authorization to obtain a report. In addition, alerting candidates with FCRA notices is absolutely imperative. Effective January 1st, 2013, employers must update their FCRA notices, including the summary of rights under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. The forms are being updated to reflect that the enforcement of the FCRA is now under the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau rather than the Federal Trade Commission. What is important to know about a prospective new hire? Legal compliance, the need to know about a candidate. Are there answers that are required before you hire someone? Job relevancy, the want to know about the candidate for the job. Don't run it if you don't want to or don't need to know it. And company fit, the really nice to know about a candidate. Will he or she fit with the missions, values, and goals and environment of your company? For example, does your company have a corporate mission helping rehabilitate felons? Is child care part of your business? Or, for example, is this a government agency or a government contractor? So, why run background checks? On your screen, these are all reasons why you might want to run a background check. Background checks can help provide answers to many, if not all, of these questions. The first benefit of background checks that most clients see is an increase in applicant quality. The next extended benefits of comprehensive employment background screenings include increased quality of new hires, reduced workplace violence, reduced negligent hiring liability, avoiding negative publicity, the reduced losses from employee dishonesty, and making that right hire the first time. The bottom line is that the pre-employment background check can help an organization become more successful. A complete employee screening process can result in fewer applications with serious discrepancies. It discourages applicants who are trying to hide something. It increases applications from applicants who want to work in a safe environment. It increases the quality of new hires because you've got an improved applicant pool and improved selection process. Look for increased morale, monetary savings, safety, better fit placements, lower turnover rates, decreases in UI claims or unemployment insurance claims, as just some of the benefits to putting a background screening process into place and one that's relevant to your company. If you have any further questions, please type them into the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen or contact me directly. Again, I'm Samara Beachdell, and you can reach me at my direct phone extension listed or by email. And if we didn't answer your question today, we will be addressing those with a personal email to you within the next 48 hours. Thank you so much for the time you've spent with us today. I hope you each have a wonderful day and the rest of your week.